development of palate. From each maxillary process, plate-like shelf it grows medially called palatal process. You can see in the diagram. So these are the palatal processes which are arising from the maxillary processes. So the definitive palate is formed from three components. What are those? The palatal processes, and the primitive palate is formed from the frontonasal process. Now this definitive palate is formed by the fusion of these three parts as follows. So this is a diagram taken from your standard textbook. So these are the palatal processes. This is premaxilla. So what are the steps? Each palatal process fuse with the posterior margin of the primitive palate. So you can see in this diagram. In next diagram, the two palatal processes fuse with each other in the midline. You can see here. Now this fusion, it is beginning or from the interior side, and it is moving backward. So this is the direction how the fusion is happening. So leading on to the formation of definitive palate. So this is how the definitive palate is formed. Now medial edges of the palatal processes fuse with the free lower edges of the nasal septum, thus separating the two nasal cavities from each other and from the mouth. You can see here. So this is nasal septum. When these two palatal processes they fuse with each other, they are fusing with the lower edge of the nasal septum, thereby separating to the two nasal cavities. At a later stage, the mesoderm in the palate undergoes intramembranous ossification to form the hard palate. However, the ossification does not extend into the posterior most portion, which remain as soft palate. The part arising from the frontonasal process forms premaxilla, which carries the incisor teeth. You can see here. So what is the result? Anterior 2/3 portion it becomes the hard palate, posterior 1/3 it becomes a soft palate, and posterior most is uvula. Now this anterior 2/3 is contributed from the frontonasal process as well as from the palatal processes of the maxillary process, but this soft palate is getting the contribution from the maxillary process only, and uvula is just the part of this. So it is the posterior most portion of the soft palate. Coming to the cleft lip, it is commonly occurring in the upper lip. Incidence is 1 in 1000 births, and mostly the males they are affected, that is 60 to 80% are males. Types, that is unilateral cleft lip, bilateral cleft lip, and central cleft lip. In unilateral there is failure of fusion of maxillary process with the medial nasal process. In bilateral cleft lip, the failure of fusion of maxillary process with the frontonasal process. Central cleft lip is failure of development of philtrum of the upper lip from the frontonasal process. Very rarely the two mandibular processes they fail to fuse in the midline to cause the lower cleft lip. So normally these lip anomalies are seen. So unilateral, then bilateral, and central. Oblique facial cleft or orbitofacial fissure, rare congenital anomaly in which the maxillary process fails to fuse with the lateral nasal process. Fissure extends from the medial angle of the eye to the upper lip. As a result, the nasolacrimal duct is exposed to the exterior. Cleft palate. So there is defective fusion of the various components of the palate give rise to the clefts in the palate, vary considerably in degrees. That there are two types are there, that is complete cleft palate and incomplete cleft palate. And complete cleft palate is basically of two types, that is unilateral and bilateral. So this is the difference between unilateral and bilateral. Unilateral complete cleft palate is when maxillary process on one side does not fuse with the premaxilla. You can see in this diagram. It is always associated with the cleft lip on the same side. In bilateral complete cleft palate, you can see when both the maxillary processes they fail to fuse with the premaxilla. Secondary palate is divided into two halves by a median cleft with an anterior V-shaped cleft separating the premaxilla completely. So this is bilateral complete cleft palate. In incomplete or partial cleft palate, if it is confined to the uvula only, we call it as bifid uvula. This cleft may extend into some distance of soft palate, or it may extend up to the hard palate. So these are the incomplete or partial cleft palate. Then other anomalies are, this is the rare anomaly which is known as the proboscis cyclops. In this, the nose forms a cylindrical projection arising just below the forehead, and this cylindrical projection is given the name proboscis. So this anomaly is associated with one half of the nose and is associated with the fusion of the two eyes, which is known as cyclops. So this is rare anomaly. Then coming to the next anomaly, that is macrostomia. When inadequate fusion of the maxillary and mandibular processes it happens, it may lead on to the wide mouth. So that is given the name macro. Macrostomia means wide mouth. Microstomia is just opposite to that, when the too much fusion of these two processes is happening. So that is leading on to a small mouth. So that is microstomia. So this is all about the development of palate and the different anomalies associated with the palate. Then cleft lip, cleft palate, so proboscis cyclops, and oblique facial cleft. So this is all about this today's lecture. Thank you very much.